Many of the implements in the buffalo trunk before you are either directly from the buffalo, or are implements used to hunt or process the buffalo. Many of the bones in this thing, well, all of the bones, are from bison, whether it be the rib bones, the leg bones. All of the things in this trunk are pertaining to the buffalo, how to process it, how to use it, the tools and implements that can be made from it, things that tie into daily life, that these were the implements back in the day used by the native peoples here. You can see why the buffalo was so important to us, because all the articles and implements that you can get out of that, whether it was for hunting or for war or for agriculture, the buffalo housed many things that were important to our people. The bones could be made into tools. You would simply grab the bones from a buffalo kill site and you would clean them off, and you would abrade them on a stone. Once they were abraded, you would just keep rubbing it back and forth on that stone, slowly working it. And you would get the general shape of a knife, or could be even a paintbrush like you have before you. But the way I like to do it is very old school. So if you look on some of these pieces, you might be able to see a few scratches or marks here and there. That's from the sandstones that I use. I like to be very traditional when it comes to this kind of thing. Helps me connect with my past and our people. More or less, it gives it authenticity. You really get to feel the daily struggle as it was back then. Today, you can simply go into a place and buy something, but back then you had to go out and do it with your own hands. And that's kind of rewarding. As you can see before you, some of these things are really nice. Some of them are simplistic, but they all have a purpose, though. The stonework in here is made from porcelainite. You go out into the hills and you find a good suitable chunk. If you're unsure if your rock or stone is knappable, just simply tap them together. If it makes a light ringing sound, then you have a stone that is knappable most of the time. Hit the stones together and bust a shard off. Once the shard is acquired, what I usually do is I get an antler and you put it on the edge of the stonework and you press down. That is called pressure flaking. It is an ancient technique used to sharpen knives, arrowheads, spears. Anything of stonework was sharpened that way. While a flake is razor sharp, it is very, very brittle. So these things were used in fine cutting tasks. But if you needed something that was more strong and durable, you would do the pressure flaking technique and you would get a serrated blade. Those serrations are the things that give a knife its cut. While not as strong, or well, not as sharp as a flake, it is a lot more durable and strong. It's a lot more better to look at too, in my own opinion. But anyways, that's how I would make stone tools. That's how our ancestors did it. All of humanity used stone tools at one time, one way or another. So you can kind of get an imagination of how these tools were so important back then, how it was your livelihood on the line with the things that you made, that you would use. So we're going to go to the paint brushes there, made out of your little rib bone. Now, these paint brushes didn't have to be made out of rib bone. Forgive me for calling them paint brushes. They're more painting tools than brush. But these are made out of rib bone of a bison. They could be made out of any kind of porous bone you can get, bone that has a lot of marrow or holes in it. That is perfect for getting the paint stuck in the pores when you're working it. That's the whole point of this tool being porous, is so that the paint will adhere better to it. Kind of like how an old-time quill would work when you dip it in ink. It's about the same principle. But you have to soak the tools first before you use them so the pigment will adhere. Then you can paint. But what I do is I get a piece of flint, cut the rib, abrade it. Once it's abraded, then I let it air out. Once it's aired out, I do a final sanding. That final sanding is very important because it gives it its right texture and quality. Makes it look nice too. But mainly it's so the things inside the bone, the marrow, it is not jagged and it won't snag on your leather while you are painting. You want it to be smooth so it glides over the surface. So it'll paint very nicely. You do not want to work so hard on something and then have it ruined by scratches. So you got to take your time with these tools, especially the bones, because bones are very good. They're strong when they're alive. That's why you're supposed to, when you harvest a bone, you let it sit for a while. Otherwise, it will crack. The bone cracking is a very bad thing, and you don't want it to happen because it'll take the quality of your piece down. The durability will be jeopardized. Well, stones are nice and durable. You cannot always get knapping material, as I've said. There are many areas in the United States where you just have sandstone and you do not have knappables. That is why bone is important to use as a tool. It's sad that so many archaeological examples do not exist anymore because they were eaten by predators or scavengers, and they just kind of like wore away with time. Bone doesn't last that long compared to stone. So there were lots of bone that was being used back then. It was kind of the common thing in the olden days. It was your disposable tool, your could be a knife, could be a scraping tool. We also made chisels out of the bones as well, certain tools. Now, some of these implements in the buffalo trunk, they could have multi-use, especially the rib knives and the knife made out of the cannon bone of the buffalo. That small knife can be used for quill flattening, which is a very important skill amongst the tribe. In the olden days, the woman would use porcupine quills to adorn ornaments, to make quill work on their shirts, on the robes, on the teepees and lodges. The old days were kind of hard because we didn't have currency back then. We bartered, we traded. So any kind of thing that is beautiful or rare or ornate would have been very valuable, and you need the right tools to work these things. So a quill flattener is definitely important. And you can use it for all kinds of things, these bone tools. They're simply abraded, cut down with flint, notched. Now the thing is that some of these tools wouldn't have just been taken raw. Many of the times we would have brought some of the pieces of the buffalo home and we would have roasted them, and then we would have took the bones out afterwards. That drives all the blood out of the bone, out of the marrow. And once that is done, your bone is ready to be used. So you can go about it multiple ways when it comes to making bone tools, but it's just a simple thing of getting the bone, seasoning it, meaning letting it sit for a while so it doesn't crack. After the seasoning time is over, usually about a week, then you can grind and abrade the bone, carve it any way you want, shape it any way you want. You can make sewing awls, knife blades, chisels. All kinds of implements can be made out of this, as well as the horn. The horn, as you know, is just keratin, which is basically just hair, but it's very versatile. What I usually like to do is I get a container of boiling water. Then I throw my buffalo horns inside of that water and I boil them for quite a while, usually for about 45 minutes, 30 minutes. Once they're nice and pliable, you bend them and you shape them. Now, it's important that you carve them out to make sure that there are no flaws or rough spots, or part of the buffalo horn is kind of stink because it could be old or it might have been out on the prairie. So you try and carve these rough, irregular pieces away with a piece of flint or any kind of knife or implement that you have. Once you're done scraping it, you put it back in the water and boil it some more. And then you get a river rock or a stone and you place it in the inside of the horn, and it opens the horn up. so you can make implements like spoons and ladles like you have before you. Now, these two are just very basic styles, but I like basic. It's one of the best, durable. Some of our horn implements back then, our spoons and dinnerware, were very ornate, very beautiful. They were works of art that the woman liked to show off at gatherings of what they could do. So these pieces were very important back then, both as a status symbol and as a household object. We didn't have much that we could put our pride into because we all had basic things to do. We didn't have jobs we could brag about today. What we did was we could just brag about what we've made. That brought pride to your people, to your family. So if you were a very crafty person, you would be recognized for that. You would bring your family up a notch. So some of these implements are really simple, but they're well made. They're made to last a lifetime, if as it is. If you treat them well, they will last very long. But after making your spoon, getting the river rock on the inside of it, you let it cool, you bend it. Once it cools, it will stay in that shape that you've formed it to. After that, you take the river rock out once it's cool, and then you let it dry. Once it is dried, you get a sandstone and you rub it back and forth on that spoon until it is smooth. Once it is nice and smooth, you get a piece of fine buckskin and you rub it on there, and that buffs it and polishes it. Then afterwards, you get a piece of tallow from either the inside of the buffalo, it's kidney fat, or even muscle fat. Then you rub it on the outside of the horn, and it polishes it a beautiful black color, nice and smooth. But that is how we made these horn spoons, and that is how I made these spoons as well. But following tribal instructions. All of it is oral, so you have to have trial and error. There was no pictures that I could reference to, but well, there are many pictures, but you really have to look hard to find these things. So the things that I've learned on here took a matter of years to find out here and there, trial and error, and they've turned out pretty well. The thing before you is, of course, a bladder. The bladder of the buffalo was very important, as I've stated before, because it was it was like a Ziploc bag in the olden days, or a water cup. Anything you needed to store that was liquid would be poured into the cup. It needs to be filled constantly, otherwise it begins to emit an odor. It'll start to smell if you don't keep fresh water in there, if you let it sit too long, or you let the water go down and you don't fill it up all the way. It'll start to attract flies and it'll go bad. So you either have to dry this cup out like it is now, but while it is drying, you must rub it in your hands and it thickens. It gets all these creases in the cup. The creases may look kind of strange, but that is for the durability of the cup. If these creases were not here, it would just be a smooth surface. And once you smush it or move it, it would crack. They get very brittle when they're dry. But with all these creases, there's more, let's say there's more places it can bend. It can move fluidly, fluidly, I mean. But that's why it has this surface. But what I did was I went and sent the word out that I needed a buffalo bladder, and I got one from a man in the Dakotas. A Lakota man gave it to me. And but what you would do is, once the buffalo was down, you would get the guts out and the innards. You would take the choice parts back to camp, and you would usually get the bladder. You would dump the contents out, and you would take it down to the creek and wash it. Once it was washed, then you would blow it up like a balloon. Once it is blown up to this balloon shape, you tie a piece of sinew around the end so the air is trapped inside. Then you hang it on a stick and you let it dry. Once it is dried, it is a hardened shape, or it is like a balloon shape, but it is very hard. And this can be used for later. It is now preserved. It will not go bad. But this is how these were traded back in the days, because you have a lot of butchering to do at the moment. You cannot be messing around with trying to make a water cup down by the creek. You got to help your family butcher. So once the butchering was done and you had your own time, you can take this bladder, resubmerge it in water and let it get softened. Once it is softened, you stretch it over a hoop like I have done. The hoop is usually made out of a soft wood that is easily bendable, like willow. Once the hoop is bent, it is tied in place with sinew that is wet, and then it is sewn over the rim of over where you've cut the bladder. Once it is sewn to this thing, it is dried. Then you have a cup that is ready to use, or a bucket. And you can even sew the little stick on the very top as a bail, just so you can tie it to a lodge or even to a horse while you're moving, a travois. But these were the common drinking cups of the camp. Every lodge had them. In the olden days, it was very looked down upon if you used the bucket to fill directly from the creek. That's why the buffalo horn spoons were so important, because it was etiquette. In the olden days, when you would go and fill your bucket, you took your time. This is something that the people are going to drink. It has to be done with thoughtfulness, not carelessness. Otherwise, you will have silt on the bottom of your bucket. You might even scoop up a tadpole, and nobody would want that. So you would use the horn, the buffalo horn, and you would scoop it with the ladle, and you would pour it into that bucket. And once you got the clean water, and you'd head back to camp. So these spoons and this bladder had many uses, and they were used for many things. They were taken on the war journeys. They were taken when the camp was moved. They were always on horses, or sometimes when a person would carry their possessions on their back. Somebody would be holding a water bucket, and if the children were thirsty, there would be water at hand. So these were very important implements back in the day. Going back to the topic of keratin, or buffalo horn, or the hooves, before you are the toys of the native children. These bones are from the hooves of a buffalo, as we've spoken before, but these ones are from my own family dinner table, as I'll call it. My father likes to cook hoof soup, and he's already spoken of it, but after the hooves are boiled and they're nice and tender, he eats away all of the outer layer. And then once that is gone, all you have to do is simply get something sharp and scrape off all of the excess tendon and sticky stuff that's on it. Once that is nice and cleaned, you let it dry, and once it is dry, you get a sandstone and you sand off any rough spots on this bone so it is nice and smooth. You do not want to give something rough to a child. They're going to kind of poke their hands, or it's going to irritate them. So you try and make this bone as smooth as possible. Once it's nice and smooth, it's ready to give to a child. There are many types of bone toys like this. They're used to mimic horses. In the olden days, they would add pigments and dyes, whether it was from earth paint or whether it was from berries. I've seen some toy horses amongst the Lakota that are made from the buffalo hooves, and they're painted purple with chokecherry juice. So I thought that was very nice. It represented a different type of breed of horse, obviously not purple, but it could be in a roan or a pinto or different colors. But some of the more basic ones before you are just the normal yellowish white color. But the shaping of the bone is very simple, as I've said before. Just scrape it with stone. Once it dries, and sand it, abrade it. Then buff it with a piece of buckskin to get all the dust off. Now the hoofs themselves, the black parts, once those are cooked, you get a piece of flint and you scrape the insides out. Once the insides are scraped out well enough, you let it dry, or you can poke a hole in it whatever you want to do with this hoof, you kind of have to act fast or you let it dry. That's the good thing about keratin, is that it's very durable. It can be reheated many times and it'll still have its durability. So if you happen to mess up on a spoon or an object, all you have to do is reheat it with water and you can reshape it and remold it, recarve it. So if you're unhappy with your work, like I usually am, I'm kind of a critic of my own work. So if I don't like something, I can always reheat it and redo it later on or reshape it. But that is how these old toys were made back in those days. So going on to the talk of hide and leather, before you is a buffalo tail. As we've said, this had many uses back then. It was an ornament, was a fly swatter. It could be a dipper for a sweat lodge. In those olden days, it was very important to have around because you were always drying meat. There were always hunters going out of camp. And when you would get the meat back, you would have to cut it up and dry it. There was no refrigerator back then. So you either had to eat the meat or you had to dry it, otherwise it would go bad. And that was the job of the child, or sometimes the old lady herself would do it if she was done cutting the meat and drying it or hanging it. Somebody would be there with the buffalo tail swatting away all the flies, or sometimes they would build a small fire underneath to let the smoke rise up and the flies would stop bothering that. But the buffalo tail has many uses. You have to be very careful when you're skinning the buffalo tail because the rawhide is rather thin in that area. So you have to skin it very carefully when going down the tail of the buffalo. So once it's nice and skinned and it's flat, you hang it up or you put it on the side of a log, something that's going to dry it. Once it's dried, you peel it off that, okay, so it's not just a log. You have to scrape the bark off of a log, let it dry, and then place the wet tail on that so it's a nice smooth surface. Then when you want to, you can simply peel it off, or you can do it the old way and stretch it with little pegs. And you scrape off all the membrane, the squishy parts. Once all the fat and the membrane is off the tail, you let it dry. Then you can either apply brain tan solution. In the olden days, people used to tan their skins with brain. The old Cheyenne recipe for brain tanning hides was a little part of brain, liver, and fat. You would mix that together in hot water, and you would apply it to any surface of skin, whether it be a buffalo or a deer or elk, it didn't matter. But you would clean the skin off and you would apply this brain tanning solution. Once you worked it in, you let it sit overnight. The next day, you dry it out and you work the hide between your hands or on a tree and dry it out. Once it is dry and you keep working it, the hide becomes soft. This buffalo tail is tanned, so it is not just rock solid. It's not tanned as soft as I'd like, but it's tanned well enough. If one would like to use it for anything, all you would need to do is soak it in water and you could sew it onto a stick or cut it into a teepee ornament. It's all up to the user's imagination what they would use the tail for. The hide was the same way. It's like a blank canvas when you look at a buffalo hide. It could be a robe, it could be a piece of rawhide. Now, rawhide is basically just any kind of animal hide that has been scraped clean and it is dried. It is untanned. That's why they call it rawhide. Of course, we know hide is an animal skin, but yeah, rawhide can be used for anything. You can re-soak it and make leather again, or you can make bindings. Like what I've done here is on this bone-handled knife made out of rib, I sewn buffalo hide onto the handle so it'll get a better grip. This is made out of rawhide. Now, what I've used to make it stick is a thing that's called hide glue. In the olden days, we just didn't have Elmer's glue lying around, you know, no Walmart, but In the olden days, we would get the hide and the woman would tack it out on the prairie, stretch it. Once it was stretched, they would clean off all the viscera and the membrane off the hide, the fat. They would scrape it clean. And since a buffalo hide is kind of irregular in some spots, it's thicker in some spots and thinner in some spots. It was a woman's priority to get the hide as uniform as possible. She would show off her skills, her tanning skills. If a buffalo hide was tanned uneven, she would be very embarrassed. People or other women would talk about her for being lazy. So a woman really had to look good in front of her sisters, her grandmother, her mother. Otherwise, it made her family look lazy if she did it badly. So in those olden days, they were very, very uniform with their tanning. So they would scrape the hide. Any thick spots, they would scrape them thin so it would match with the rest of the hide. Now, these hide shavings that she would scrape off, they were saved in a little pile. Once they were dry, they would turn hard like little thin shavings of skin. Once she was ready to make, once she gathered enough of these, you would simply get these and you would put them in a thing of water, whether it be in a stone pot or a buffalo stomach. I don't know, whatever you want to boil your stuff in. But then you would heat up the water in that, and you would cook this hide scraps for a few hours, 1 to 2 hours, just at a low boil. Once the water is heated very hot, it'll start to evaporate, so you need to put more water in this mix. After about an hour or two, that water will thicken down to like a gravy, a gelatin. Once it cools, it will turn into like a jelly. So the hide glue can be used then. The pieces of the hide are strained out before that happens, though. So while it is still hot and a liquid, it is strained, cleaned, and you can use that hide glue to coat whatever surface. But that is what I use to coat the inside of that handle on the rib bone knife, so it would adhere to the bone. Otherwise, hide doesn't stick to bone readily. It needs to be glued on. Glued, and it is sewn on with sinew from the back straps of a buffalo. But once the hide glue was cooled, you would start to get it and you would rub it on the end of a stick. You would twist that stick back and forth. It is almost like dipping a candle. If any of you know the processes of candle making, is you dunk the candle in the hot wax, you let it dry, let it cool, and then you dip it again. That's almost the same way you make a hide or a glue stick that you see before you. It's basically just time and patience when it comes to making this thing. Otherwise, you have to throw the glue away because it'll go bad, or your kids will eat it before you're done with it. In the olden days, that's what they would make a good soup out of. It was a thickener, was these skin shavings. So after the person was done using this glue, they could simply put it back in water and reboil it. It's all edible. It's animal, animal skin. It's basically just gelatin in the olden days. So it could be used as a thickener in soup, or it could be used to make raw hide very durable or make it stick to something. And in the olden days for buffalo hunting, as I've said, the way to mount stone tools onto a handle. The other two knives that I have there are made out of wood with the stone, and it's held together with pine pitch glue. If you didn't make this glue, if your tribe didn't use this glue, then you would use the hide glue. But yeah, that was how they held their arrow points to the shafts, was they would get the sinew of a buffalo, the backstrap sinew, wet it, and they would soak it in hide glue, rub the hide glue on it, then they would wrap it tight around the arrow shaft and the head. Once they got it done, they would smooth it down and it would stick to itself, and they would let it dry. Then you would have an arrow that was ready to use, or a dart or a spear, anything that you needed. But Hide glue has many uses. In the olden days, as I said, we didn't have a store to go to, so we were always saving for winter. So if a woman didn't use that hide shavings for the glue, she would save it for later on during the year. In case there were starving times, she would always have something on hand that would be used for food. That's the good thing about everything being natural, is that you can boil it and cook it, eat it, if you were hungry enough. Rawhide can be made into a delicious dish. It doesn't have much flavor, but it can be seasoned well. It's almost like noodles if you cook it long enough, nice and soft. But in the olden days, hide was a delicacy. That was sometimes they would dig a hole and they would put the buffalo hide in there, and they would pile rocks in between there, and then they would put the dirt back there, and then they would build a fire on top while it was nice and hot. Once it was cooked for a while, that fire, tended for a few hours, they would remove all the dirt, empty the rocks out, and they would pull that hide out, and the hair would come off very easily. And once you cleaned the hair off and rinsed it a bit, that hide was really soft and edible. It was a real treat back then. So you can see how crazy we were at the time. But yeah, in the olden days, everything was made to either eat or use.
Our name, it dates back to many generations. Tall was a very honored name, and where it came from was one of our great grandfathers was a headsman of a dog soldier group, and a headsman was kind of like a chief. His name was Tall Buffalo Bull, and he was killed at Summit Springs, Colorado. And this is where a lot of the artifacts of the buffalo was taken. And when the soldiers took all the stuff from the different lodges, and they the bull, the tall bull name has been very sacred. This is why buffalo means so much to us. There's a lot of things that anytime you make toys in the wintertime, like a sled out of the ribs of a buffalo, once the water starts to break up, the ice breaks up in a spring, it's customary to throw all your winter toys into the water to throw them away. Otherwise, they used to say, if you do not do this, you are going to grow hair all over your face, which was part of a prophecy, that strange people would come to our lands and they would have hair all over their bodies, and nobody wanted that. So because they were toys that you played with in the wintertime, you threw them in a stream once that the ice started to break up, so you wouldn't have a hairy face. So a lot of that was tradition. A lot of it was taboos. And when you deal with buffalo bones, you got to be careful. Once you break a bone, you cannot place the ends back together again. Otherwise, they say that one of your horses will break a leg. And horses, we got horses before the Lakota people, and we gave them their first horses. But our first horses was a blue roan and a buckskin. Those were our two horses, the first two that came to the Cheyenne people. And once they got the horses, the sky was the limit. They traveled all over the West. raiding camps. They went clear into Mexico to get a lot of their irons and stuff like that, weapons. But they were traders. They took supplies from the West, buffalo robes and buffalo meat, and they traded it to other people, other tribes that didn't have the roots or the plants. They could trade, and the government had to eventually stop that. That's why they put the borderline was a river between the Bent's Ford. There was a river, there was a trading post there. The Southern Cheyenne were on one side and the Northern Cheyenne was on the other, and you couldn't cross it. You couldn't go in this to the other side because they tried to quell the Cheyennes. They tried to keep them from trading all over the country. And this was one of the things that they did. And the other one was many of the treaties that they had, which were eventually broken. But they tried to stop the Cheyennes from going all over the country because they were such fierce warriors. They had 2 covenants, and they were undefeatable for a time. So it's all of the so the buffalo is very unique to us. My dad's grandmother, Ellen Brady, she had a stone she called a buffalo stone, and it's the fossilized vertebrae of a snail, but they resemble the shape of a buffalo. And all the children would stop by her cabin on the way from school just to see that stone that she had. And the unique thing about it was that stone had a calf. So all the children would stop just to see that the mother and the baby of them buffalo stones. So they all the children would come by and just to touch them, just to pet them. And she always carried them in a little buckskin satchel. It was their home. So that the buffalo stones were, I carry them and I use them for vision quests. I put them in front of me, and from time to time I pet them. I rub their back, and buffalo love to be scratched. It's you honor them. You put grease from your face on them and rub it in to shine them. So there's many things with the buffalo that's very sacred. And what my son has talked about was I really enjoyed listening to. It's like listening to my father and how he used to talk.